This has been a really strange year. And one of the things that I was thinking about in relation to Windrush was the fact that my parents, who arrived here from Jamaica as part of the Windrush Generation, were now in a very special place. And perhaps it was time to recognise that in a year where we've not been able to spend as much time together because of the pandemic. And the special thing I was thinking is that when I was a child born here in London, I never knew my grandparents. And that's because my parents came here after the war to help rebuild this country. And it never struck me really how they would have left much of their family. And of course, when they arrived here and had their own family, we were left without that extended family because, of course, all we had was our parents and our siblings. Well, my mother in particular is my modern day Mary. And I thought it would be really interesting to hear her tell her story in relation to Windrush, but in the context of this is the first time in this country that my family have had grandparents, children, grandchildren, and in fact in my family, a great-grandchild. So I thought it'd be really interesting to have my mother's grandchildren ask her a few questions about Windrush.
Why did you decide to move to England? Was it difficult?
My cousin decided to send for me and I was glad for the opportunity.
Did England want you to come here? Did England want you to come here?
Yes, in those days they were recruiting for people from the West Indies to come to England. The war had just finished and there was lots of work here. So the opportunity were here for us to work, which I am grateful for.
What was life like before you moved to England, and why was it so hard?
Life in Jamaica was very hard. As a youngster, I moved around from one family to the other, and it was quite difficult.
Why did you leave school at 14?
Well, there was nobody more or less in control to say whether you should or shouldn't go to school. And you haven't had school dinner or what have you just don't go. There was nobody to force you to say you have to go. And in my school, the teacher was very strict. He used to beat a lot if you were late or what. So to the end, you don't turn up.
Grandma, was it easy or hard to fit into this country when you first moved here?
I didn't have a problem because I was with family. So I wasn't lonely or anything like that.
When you settled into England, did you find your job like you expected or how you didn't expect it?
Well, I wasn't bothered what kind of job I had, as long as I have a job.
What would you have done if you had not moved here to England?
There was no work, so you were just there.
Would you like stay at home and do all the work while your parents were out working?
Parents wasn't working either. So everybody's just there.
What was it like finding someone to stay and live when you first came here?
I was staying with family, and with family in those days, we sent for one another. One comes, and after a while, we sent for another person's. So we were a group of us that always together, and we always have family around us.
Would there be a lot of people living in the house?
Sometimes. In those days, we rent a room. And we rent a room. We have a landlord, they rent a room. So in a house, if it's 4-bedroom, it could be 6 or 8 people in, 2, or somebody comes, we share a room, until that person can find a room somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then you move on.
Yeah.
But that was how it is.
When you came to this country, did you face a lot of racism? And if so, why do you think that was?
No, I didn't, because I was staying with family.
But was there racism around at the time?
Yes, there were. I remember once I bought an iron and I paid twice the price for the iron. And you could see things happen around you, but you stay away from it.
When you were sent for, could you have said no?
I could, but there wouldn't be any purpose of saying no. What would I be doing out there? There wasn't any opportunity. The only thing would go and do domestic work, work for somebody, do work field or something like that. So this was a great opportunity for me.
So we know that after the Second World War, there was a need to bring people over from the Caribbean in particular to help replace the labour. Britain's workforce was damaged because of the war. I'm just trying to get a sense of what you were feeling in Jamaica when the war was happening, because there would have been this world war going on. What sense did you have of that war?
Don't know much about it. All I could remember looking back is like Zeppelin. They used to have these Zeppelin around. You know there is a war and soldiers go to England, but it didn't affect us out there. And it's not everybody has got a radio. Those years you didn't have telly. And if you're living in the country, you don't know much about it.
And when the war ended, we know that Churchill gave a great speech to the nation to say the war had ended. Was there any such announcement? Because this was obviously relevant to the Caribbean, because
There may be, but that probably, if you're living in Kingston, where you would have radios or so forth around. But those days you didn't have television or so on. It would be just a radio. So somebody would have heard it, but it's just when you come here, then you realize what is what or who is who.
So it's been really interesting listening to you talk about your upbringing, because what the impression I've got is that during the Second World War you wouldn't have known much about the war at all, because it was just something which was going on a long way away. No TV obviously, and not everybody even had radios. But after the war, there was an opportunity to come here. Britain needed to reinforce its workforce, and that meant that a lot of people around you would have started disappearing because they were coming to England, which would have been quite difficult. And eventually, the opportunity came for you to come here through family. And then you came here and you had to do various different jobs, any kind of job really. And although there was racism around, you were able to sort of hide away from it because you're within the family network. So you've obviously got children now, and I'm one of them, and Kareem, and you've got grandchildren. So this is the first time we've had 3 generations all come together. What is it you think about the future for your grandchildren? Because you were worried about what life might be like for you, but you kind of had some control over it. But with your own children and then grandchildren, and what we've seen happen with Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matter, racism is still around today. Have you got any stories in relation to me and anything you want to sort of say for the grandchildren?
I used to worry a lot for you, because you always see going along the road a black kid in the back of a police car, And that always worries me a lot in those days. And I couldn't sleep if you're out.
So to your grandchildren in particular on Windrush Day, what message of hope would you like to give them? This is the first time that we've had, or you've had, children, grandchildren, even great-grandchildren. So what would you like to say to them this Windrush Day?
I hope they have a better life than I had when I came to this country. And I believe that we pave the way so that they grow up to be a better person than we are. Because we struggle, but they shouldn't struggle the way we did. I don't know if that's right or what, but that's how I think anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's probably right for me to say on behalf of all the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren and your children, that if it wasn't for what you and what Dad did, the decisions you made, we wouldn't have had the opportunity that we've had. And it's important that our children...
And it was a struggle.
Yeah, well, your children know that and your grandchildren know that. So thank you.
Yeah, and we're just grateful. All we ask in life is for everybody to be a good citizen.